Alright, so, um, yeah, not a couple days ago, like maybe roughly 2-ish years, yeah, yeah, like 2 years ago, I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about, it was like a philosophical debate, stupid shit, not stupid, but you know how these things go, especially if you don't know the person all too well, I guess, hopefully, anyways, um, talking with a friend, and we were on we were debating whether you could tell a person's personality by the way they presented themselves on the outside. I was in the camp that you could, you know, and he was in the camp that you couldn't. And to elaborate, he was a roommate, not a friend, but fuck it, whatever. But yeah, we were okay. So we were talking about the point that I brought up is that, like, even if you can't tell the story, even if you don't know how the clothes got there, how the person came to the conclusion to present themselves as such on the outside, what you are seeing on the outside is still a representation of who that person is, at least in some capacity. That, like, even just like in the like most basic, simple, logical sense or rational sense, I put on my clothes. My clothes were determined by the clothes that I put on were determined by what I like. What I like is somewhat determined by what kind of person I am. Therefore, the clothes that I wear is indicative on some level of some kind of what kind of person I am. Like, it's just straight logic. And I got into the woods of what's it called? Sort of like, sounds silly, but pattern recognition. That humanity itself, not even humanity, just all of life, but we're humans. We come essentially from the same fundamental biological focal point, in that most of the things we do can be seen in other places. And of course, these things are shaped by cultures and context, but they are relatively or fundamentally coming from a similar or even same point-ish. I was talking about headphones. So I've not changed my stance on headphones. I think, like, they still are what they are, and what they are is what I'll be describing to you. But anyways, fuck. Yeah, sorry, I just woke up. So my voice is not this deep. I mean, it sounds similar to like right now. But anyways, headphones. So with headphones, I argued at that point that a person wearing headphones, that walks around wearing headphones, and like they're in a public environment, okay? Public environment. Basically what I mean by that is, like, what happens next isn't entirely guaranteed. On top of that, you're also surrounded by the happening world around you. So somebody that's wearing headphones in a public environment, in an environment that isn't guaranteed, let alone, like, we were in, like, wherever, he was my roommate who went to the same college, and our college was located in the biggest city in our state. So yeah. So somebody walking around wearing headphones in an environment like that is somebody that I would low-key classify, like, I would call that person stupid. I'd call them stupid. Not only stupid in terms of, like, what are you doing, bro? Somebody could pick you up off the nah. Like, sure, stupid in that sense in some regards, but more so stupid in that, like, they don't appear to be like aware, not in the same way that someone who is aware of their surroundings, like in like a threat prevention kind of way would be, but like someone who is so fundamentally fixed on themselves, not fundamentally, that's too deep, but someone who is fixed on themselves to the point where they decide that what's it called, that it's basically like willingly handicapping yourself, in my mind, you know, where like it's sort of like an inward turned what's it called, like point of focus. Dude, I'm saying a whole lot of shit and it's not getting anywhere, but that doesn't really matter. An inward turned point of focus, which essentially means that this person is walking around through their life basically, yeah, with their awareness turned completely inwards. And when you're listening to your music, you're listening to your music, you're listening to things that you like. You know, your ears are made to receive the outside world, or your ears are made to receive information that comes from the world around you. And in a little way, I guess kind of like a domain expansion, the headphones, yeah, they serve as like a domain expansion where you have essentially surrounded you with you, you know, and you're walking around listening to you all day. You're listening to your favorite things. You're listening to your favorite music. You're walking around like in a little bubble that you've created to listen to you. And I said that I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody like that. Like, yeah, I feel like maybe at some point that person could grow to see you as part of them too. But for the most part, that person, it will take way too long to get through to that person emotionally. Like that person will 100% be like stubborn and sensitive, you know, walking around listening to headphones. They're all about themselves. They take everything you say seriously, but in the worst way possible. They're constantly self-defensive, self-protective, and they're looking for ways to they're constantly looking for ways to uphold that you and I dichotomy, you know. And I said I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with somebody like that. He flipped up. He called me crazy. I don't really give a fuck. I think he's kind of. I don't like calling other guys dumb. I don't like calling people dumb in general. But, you know, again, like I think that I'm right about this. I don't think I'm crazy for thinking this. I think like if you understand on some level how people work, or at least just how like, you know, like not like how people work down to the biological level, but just understanding what motivates people to act in certain ways, it becomes at least semi-obvious that like there's a pattern to behavior, that every single thing that is done comes from a place of, it comes from some layer of intention, whether that is like a, you know, intentional intention or like subconscious intention or like spiritual intention, whatever the fuck you want to call it. It comes from some layer of motivation, you know. So that's how I see things, and that's specifically how I saw the headphones. It doesn't necessarily make me sad that that conversation went that way, because I think that like at the end of the day, if you're saying things that people don't understand, or you're saying things that people don't want to understand, not that like what I was saying was, you know, like it should be understood, because if it was complete nonsense, then like nobody is responsible for understanding that. But people who can't play with thought experiments to some degree, and I guess the question is why, you know. The crazy thing about that entire conversation is that my friend, or yeah, my roommate, friend, whatever we want to call him at this point, he also walked around wearing headphones, and I didn't even notice. But like I always kind of saw him, even before then, I always kind of saw him as like self-centered, very, very stubborn, very, very hard-headed. And I remember one night after that conversation, like a couple nights after that conversation, actually, I was driving my car back to the apartment garage, and I saw him walking around the street at night wearing headphones, and I was like, huh, well, would you take a look at that? Looking kind of strange, huh? Nah, but yeah. This is yeah. No, I thought I didn't think it was weird. I felt vindicated. I was like, damn, like I'm not fucking crazy. I know what I'm talking about, and these people are some fucking oddballs. Not oddballs, but they are very much living in the world of assumed predictability. They're still in that headspace of everybody's an individual, like they focus so much on the person that they entirely forget that there's a human there too, and I think like that's one of my biggest issues with modernity and modern life, at least in the social realm. People, it almost feels intentional that people are trying not to understand things. That people are constantly looking for places to put up barriers, to put up layers of ambiguity, because trying to understand a certain thing about themselves, about the world, about people, about others, would imply something that they're not necessarily ready to reconcile with, And I think that scares the people who know, and it disincentivizes the people who don't know from knowing, Like, it's too much work. It's too much work to go out into the world and to learn something new, So people don't. It's too much work to understand where we come from. Like, even just like on a philosophical, like, how does my mind travel throughout the world? Where does my mind come from? What influences my mind and whatnot? Even on that level, that's scary too. And I don't blame anybody. Like, our phones are comfortable. Life is comfortable. Things feel good. Things feel predictable. There's always a tomorrow, and tomorrow always has our friends. It always has our room and such. But at the same time, I think we're taking a lot of things for granted. I do, I think we are assuming way too much based off way too little evidence. And on top of that, with contradicting experiences outside of us, like basically, the files just came out, and people are so worried about, who's touching these people, who's touching, like who's out here touching people. Like, dude, it was basically like they basically just confirmed that our world, or at least like a chunk of the Western world, a good chunk of the Western world that we actually deal with on a day-to-day basis, was inhabited by like Satan worshiping elites that appear to be controlled at a higher level that we're not aware of. But I feel like it's all smoke and screens. I feel like the file release is it's a controlled fire, and nothing's gonna happen. But I went from headphones to Epstein, so who knows?